Welcome to Practical Shamanism. I'm Katie Weatherup. I'm a former engineer with 20 years of experience working as a shamanic practitioner, and I hope to help you to connect to your personal power and magic, and to support you in living a really good life that just keeps getting better. Thank you so much for joining me. So one of the gifts I think you can give yourself that's really powerful is taking the time to really figure out for yourself what would be enough money. And by enough money, I don't just mean the basics of being able to pay the bills and have food and shelter, but the point at which the diminishing returns happens related to having more money. And this is an interesting concept because I think people have a real potent relationship to the dream of winning the lottery and having unlimited money. It's fun to watch people have experiences of buying their dream home and to tune into really extravagant kind of places, going to castles of yore, ruins of castles and modern castles is a fun tourist stop. And one of the ways that this really stood out for me is there's this statistic that says Americans spend more on lottery tickets than we do on event tickets and books and music and a couple of other things, like all of those put together. So actually getting the books that we could read, actually having a theater experience or a sports experience is something that people are investing less money in than they are on the dream of I could magically and overnight have huge amounts of wealth. And one of the hard things about this, in addition to the fact that that's wildly improbable, is when they look at the outcomes of lottery winners, a lot of times they die or they lose all their money or there's something that happens so people don't end up having the money even if they have that big lottery win for the most part. Usually the outcome is not that they are wealthy for the rest of their lives and they live a long, happy life with all the money. They also find that people who have big lottery wins versus people who lose a limb in an accident, there's an initial period of time of about 6 months where you're euphoric if you've had this big change in circumstances for the better, and pretty damn sad and depressed if it's been something that's changed your lifestyle. But for most people after that time, their level of happiness kind of returns to what it was before. And so one of the things that science can tell us about what people believe will make us happy and what actually makes us happy is there's some difference between those two things. So it's totally okay if the dream lives inside of you that says, no, really, I know if I won the lottery, I would be way, way happier. That's okay. But what I would like to offer is just the opportunity for you to consider that there may be a much smaller amount of money that would be the right amount of money for you to be really, really happy in your life. Because what studies have shown, again, looking at humans, is poverty is linked to unhappiness. Like, for sure, not having access to health insurance or secure food supply or secure housing creates a lot of stress and unhappiness, without a doubt. And if you have more money under those circumstances, your happiness will indeed go up. So there's a correlation, but there's a point of crossover where after you have a certain amount of money, after you have, your needs met and then enough discretionary money that you can have some choices, you can have some availability to things that you want that would bring you quality of life. Maybe it's travel, maybe it's, experiences with the family members, whatever it might be that really lights you up, that's important to you personally. More money after that has no correlation to greater happiness. There's a threshold and you're like, okay, yes, more money, there's a correlation. that you will likely be happier if you have more money if you're at this level of money, but if you cross this threshold, there stops being a correlation. Like people's happiness doesn't go up if they have double that amount of money, for example. There's really no correlation. And I think that's a really valuable thing to know, because there may be a particular dream that you're just absolutely set on that absolutely requires more money, and that's valid. Your number might be different. But there's some merit to just having the right amount of money that is enough that money is handled in your life. And I want to talk a little bit more about why that might be in the context of being able to really rock money manifestation. So when you get good at the energetic principles of money, you have a lot of ability to manifest it and bring it in. So the best combination, of course, is to be a capable functioning person. So if you have some mastery at being able to move through the world and exchange your time and talent for money and work with the systems as they exist, that's super helpful. And then if you really rock the energetic mastery, that's a really potent combination. So I have a whole program on money mastery for modern times that's about really breaking down the elements that I believe go into being able to energetically work with money manifestation, that when paired with right action can really set you up to be in a place in your life where you don't have to worry about money. And granted, circumstances vary widely, but I'm going to focus on the energetic principles because I've really seen them take me from a place of chronic money stress and fear and anxiety to a place of really being like, yeah, I have enough. I have a sustainable practice that will continue to bring in the money that I expect. I know how to be successful as an entrepreneur. I love what I do, and I'm making enough money that I can live in an environment that's really conducive for me. It's wonderful that I get to live alone with my cat a little bit out in the country with some beautiful trees and a hot tub. Like that really, really supports my quality of life. And I love to travel, so I have a budget to be able to go places, and I don't have to fret about buying organic produce at the supermarket. There are these things that really do tremendously contribute to the quality of life. And over a 3-year period, I worked really systematically with the guides to shift the energy, because my chronic stress and fear and anxiety was informing a continued experience of that. So I wanted to really work to disrupt it and to repattern. So going back to those lottery winners who lose all the money, I'm sure psychologists would have their own conversation about that, but us energetic types would say, yeah, they really rocked the law of attraction. They brought all this money to themselves. That's super cool. But they didn't necessarily understand the law of vibration, so they weren't vibrating at a frequency that harmonized with the money that came to them. And they didn't have the law of assimilation, so they weren't able to assimilate the money that came in, and therefore it didn't stay with them. It wasn't something that could remain in their field. And so even though they, at the level of physical circumstance, had all this money show up, the energetics weren't aligned, and so the situation shifted back to what was more aligned with their energy, which is a lot of people who have big lottery wins down the road ending up in even more dire financial circumstances. So the converse is also true, that you can work in a very moderate way. It doesn't have to take a ton of time and attention, but you can work on making your energy body really aligned with good money outcomes. And then it's going to be a lot less uphill in the external world to dial that in for yourself. And other people are experts on, the myriad of ways, many, 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 many ways to take action that results in money, whether it's the work that you do or the business that you start or the investments that you make. That's not my side of it. My side of it is the energetics. How do you create an energy body that tends to 24/7 in the background tend to move toward having enough money? And one of the really important steps I took on this 3-year journey of going from struggle and worry, I was living in a house. I was renting an apartment with a guy upstairs who was on meth because I was getting really low rent because I was putting up with my landlord's addicted and really unpredictable, strung out bipolar boyfriend. And he was never violent with me, and I never felt unsafe in terms of my physical safety, but it was incredibly impactful to, hear him screaming and wonder if I needed to call the cops on him, and having the cops come and carry him off at other times, and I was telling myself I couldn't afford to live somewhere else. And then I made this shift, and now I'm in this really different place with money. And there were many, many, many factors. Again, I go into that more in my program, but the one I want to share now is this defining the enough point of money. Like, if I had this much money, that would be enough. Like, that would take care of the travel that I most want to do on the level that I want to do it. So I'm not a first class all the way kind of gal. Like, I would way rather have a cool Airbnb that's out on the land where I get to like sit and look at beautiful views. I don't want to stay at the Ritz. It would be charming to travel first class, but I don't feel like I really need that. But I would definitely like to be able to afford the upgrade for extra legroom when they let you select your seat and they're like, we'll charge you an extra $80 and you get to have legroom. I really want to have the means for that. Like I said, I really benefit from living in a home space that's very aligned and very conducive, but I have this delightful little 1-bedroom house, and I don't have the story that a larger home would make me appreciably happier. And I drive cars that are up there in mileage that make me really, really happy. They're super reliable. And I had a rental, and I was looking around this brand new rental, and I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't be happier if I owned this. Not really. Wouldn't make a difference. So it's good to define, like, if you could have your really optimized lifestyle, like, what do you really want? And not so much the pie in the sky, like it's fun to dream about, this, that, or the other thing. But for me, like, designer clothes are irrelevant. I like well-made clothes. I make some of my own clothes because people don't sell the things that I really want, but there's not something where I feel like, oh, I would really, really, really feel a difference in my happiness if I had access to designer clothes, for example. And I don't want to knock that. Like, for some people, like, having this beautiful, really expensive designer bag just brings enormous joy and enormous sense of delight. And there's money that flows through the purchase of that into the hands of everyone who made it. So I'm not wanting to say, like, what really brings me deep happiness and satisfaction and good at the level of circumstance should be the same for everyone. I think it's good to identify the simplest life that really genuinely supports you and really maximizes your happiness, and at what point they're diminishing returns. So maybe there's a designer bag or two, but maybe 27 designer bags, the 28th designer bag wouldn't make you appreciably happier other than the initial rush of like serotonin and dopamine that we get from online shopping. We get reward chemistry in our brain. It was meant to persuade hunter-gatherer people to pick up the heavy thing that would really make their life better and carry it a long way with the reward of finding something super cool. And Amazon Prime is very available for us to, run that kind of chemistry. So not talking about the chemistry high, I'm talking about the sustained life satisfaction that we get from certain things. And one of the things to consider that I think most people don't, in a society where there's just a vested interest in selling us things. We're in a capitalism system, and I'm not against capitalism. I just think we want to give capitalism adult supervision in our lives so it doesn't pull us off our center. So we're not working for status symbols that would make us really happy that don't have that effect, because we've had advertising that's really good at getting into the picture centers of our brain and tapping into the deepest longings for freedom and adventure and connection and being liked and feeling safe in the world. Like advertisement is, really going for images that speak to core human needs and then associating it with the perfect dental floss or chewing gum. And I think that one of the subtle pieces of wisdom that we sort of lose track of is that there's an overhead to tending everything that we own. And so what I mean by that is that I love having two vehicles. I have a cute little Hyundai Elantra commuter car, which is awesome. It gets good gas mileage. It's super comfy. All the automatic windows work. Really, really lovely car to drive. And I have an older SUV, a little Ford Escape that gets me on four-wheel drive roads, and I can take when I go to Death Valley and get places I really want to get to. And I love that, but I'd had one car for many years, and having two cars has extra overhead. I have to keep them both registered. There are more oil changes. I have to remember to drive the SUV that's not my day-to-day car so that I keep everything kind of up and running. There's an overhead. I need extra parking room. It's worth it. It's absolutely worth it to me, but it's something to consider. I grew up on a little 5-acre farm, and it was a really good size for the experience that my parents were wanting to offer that was really rich. We had a horse, we had dairy goats. It was a lot of work. I joke that I come by my dislike of manual labor honestly because I did a lot of it growing up. But it was a really great way to grow up. I loved having the goats and the cycle of life, and it just really was a peaceful space given how energetically sensitive I was to have room to go out to the goat pasture after I got overstimulated in high school. So it was super cool, but it was in Northern California, so that has seasonal rain, but not the part that we were in doesn't have rain throughout the summer, and there's fire hazard. And if you want your pasture to be something that primarily supports the animals, you have to irrigate it. So my mom dragged sprinklers on a rotation morning and night into the locations that they needed to be because automatic watering system would have been wildly expensive. So having 5 acres for us was way better than trying to irrigate 10 acres. We wouldn't have had a better experience. We had the goats and the sheep and the experience that we wanted to have. We didn't really need more animals or more land because the farm it never paid for itself. It wasn't about that. It was about a lifestyle and an experience that my parents were, both really passionate about having. And it would have been exhausting to have to drag sprinklers across 10 acres and keep those irrigated. There were more pastures to fence. There was a lot of times that the kids were on run and fetch duty while the adults pulled fencing. There's a lot of labor that goes into it. And so on one level, it would seem like it would be much better to have 10 acres than 5 acres, but the overhead of tending that into usable farm area for what we were doing was a really different level of work and endeavor and effort that would have gone into it and cost for the things that it needed. And, for me, I love rocks and crystals and I have a lot of them, but I definitely don't want to upgrade the size of my living space to be able to display more rocks and crystals. I'm really aware that wouldn't make me happier. I already have tremendous abundance and have put all my paperback books and such in a box so that I can devote all my bookcases to displaying the beautiful crystals. So there's an overhead where there's space that is taken up by having these beautiful things, the assimilation into your life of tending them. If you have really cool sporting equipment, that might take up a lot of your garage and it might render it not usable space. And it seems like an odd thing to think about because I certainly haven't gotten to that place, and I know that probably most of the people listening haven't either. But having really large sums of money, there's an overhead to tending them. You have to figure out how to invest it and where to put it and what you can contribute to causes that you care about. And I know that seems like a good problem to have, but there's an elegance to just having the perfect amount of money that allows you to have the experiences you want, to contribute to some causes that matter. And there's an ease if you're managing a smaller amount of money. Things are simpler. You don't need as much help. There are less complicated taxes. There's an overhead. And the other side of it, because, on one level, manifestation is, this beautiful process where we can run our energy in a certain way and create certain results. And when you start to open up those secrets, it's really great. And I love hearing stories of people who really had a dream and got super resourceful even though they didn't think they had the money. So they were like, okay, I am going to figure out how to do this because my heart and soul want that trip to France or want to join this, entrepreneurship training program, or have just fallen madly in love with this house in the country. There are these times when we're like, okay, how am I going to get really resourceful? Because in my heart and soul, I want this thing. It's not a, rush of buying a new thing. It's this deep soul felt, this is the right thing for me, and money's the obstacle. And we can get really resourceful and we can do an amazing job of manifestation. There are people who are like, I didn't have the money for the car repair, but I had to have the car to get to work, so I figured it out. And what I would say about that is it's really good to stay in touch with our resourceful part, where we could sit down and take a mastermind meeting with ourselves and anyone else we can get involved in, our guides, and say, all right, here's the dream I have. I want to figure this out. What are all the different things I could do? What could I sell? What could I trade? What could I borrow? What might someone gift me? Where could I, do this? Like, I had this huge dream of travel and I didn't have the money to do it for a lot of years. So I took people with me. I organized these really beautiful, ridiculously affordable destination experiences. And I took people through Peru and Ireland, and it made me enough money that I could cover my ticket with a lot of really, really hard work. And there were people who got bridged at an incredible price because I was a really good negotiator to have these really, really rich experiences. And now I'm not offering those because it took so much effort that I'm like, I think I'd rather just stay home, make the money, and then be footloose and fancy free, because it was hard to hold a container for everyone and have my own rich spiritual experience. So I upgraded. I found something more elegant, but that was a resourceful way that I had the travel that I wanted at a time that I didn't have the budget for it. So the point of all of this is, I don't want to say that you can't manifest money for a dream, because I think you can, but it takes a lot of energy if you want to dramatically change your results over a really short period of time. There's a lot of intention and effort and focus and being resourceful and creativity and maybe working extra hard, and a lot of sometimes ritual or intention. There's a lot of your energy and focus that goes into making money move dynamically and rapidly. And if you're in I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent, it is so a good idea to put that kind of magical energy and effort and resourcefulness and creativity and brainstorming into it. And if you have a really big soul dream, I think it's really worthwhile. But if you have just kind of bought the story that a BMW car would make you happy and you're not really grounded in it, do you really want to go through all the resourcefulness and effort to try to make the price of that car flow for you if you would have a moment elation and then, there's overhead, like repairs are more expensive, registration fees are more expensive, there's more risk of it being stolen, there's overhead to having a really expensive car that you want to make sure it really, really, really contributes to your happiness in an ongoing way if you're going to go through all that trouble. And so the thing that I think is kind of maybe not as exciting, like I feel like there's I could teach you to manifest unlimited wealth, that, if I had credibility around that, would be a really, really good marketing point. Like I think I could sell 10 times as many programs as what I will end up selling. And for sure those principles work. However, if you have a number that says, this would allow me to have the home that I really want. And there might be some luxuries, but when we upgrade our homes, for example, really tuning into, would the curtains make an appreciable difference? I have a real relationship to fabric and textiles, so I'm probably going to spend more on curtains and less on fixtures if I'm creating something because of just, my personal affinities. And so getting really good about what is it that I truly want. And there's an incredible elegance to having the right amount of money, enough money, and a little bit of extra breathing room for the lifestyle that best supports you being on the planet, that sets you up to thrive. So ideally, we can get out of worrying about money. So ideally, you're not spending all your time working on money and worrying about money and thinking about money and bringing in more money. And you can move on to connection with family and friends and people you love and experiences that you would love to have. If you really study the science of happiness and what scientists can tell us, experiences tend to make people happier than material objects. So the people who, travel the world tend to be happier in retrospect with the money than the people who buy the house to keep up with the Joneses. And there's a lot of psychology that says, if we see someone else with something fancy, our brains will tell us that we want it. So when someone does win the lottery, the amount that is spent on homes and new cars in the neighborhood goes up by like 10 or 20%, and nothing changed in these people's lives except witnessing someone down the street being able to spend a lot more money on things, and that caused this longing in a different way. And I really am committed to moving from my center, moving from my truth, not being pulled off by hunter-gatherer chemistry that's misleading in the modern era, or, really good marketing for something, but really being able to come to my center, find the life that is good for me. Because, for example, I invest in having a hot tub with some of the first discretionary money that I have. So after I've paid my rent and, all the basics, that's one of the most important things. And I sit in it almost every night and I look at the stars and I recenter and I come home to myself and I decompress whatever's happening in my mind. And I love the feeling of hot water, so it helps me get back in my body. So it's really aligned for me to do work to manifest the money I need for the hot tub. And it's like an old model. It's like a really old hot tub. Everything works, but it's certainly not one of the new fancy ones. And I don't care. It's the perfect thing for me to sit in. It's a small hot tub that I adore. I don't even turn the bubbles on usually because it's a quiet contemplation. And I listen to the coyotes sing in the hills, and sometimes owls fly by. And there's this amazing thing that it bridges me to that is incredibly valuable. And there's overhead to it for sure. I have to buy chemicals and I have to drain it and I have to, turn the amount of time that it's turned on at different times of the year. And because it's an older model, I have it on a timer because otherwise it runs too much with the recirculating pump. And, there's all this stuff that goes into it. There's the electricity to heat it. And that's really, really aligned. So there's an invitation to kind of look around your life and see if you're needing to make more money to tend to a possession that isn't actually bringing you joy and happiness. So sometimes people keep really large houses because they haven't gone through the tidying up with Marie Kondo, her system, and they're keeping a bunch of things that don't bring them joy, that are really outdated, that are the relics of other times in their lives. They have the super nice golf clubs and no interest in ever playing golf again. And they're paying a tremendous amount that's getting in the way of their travel dreams because, of the inertia of the house. And if your house brings you joy, I'm not knocking this. I'm not saying what your number should be, but understanding the really drilling down on what do I want in my life? What do I really, truly, authentically, deeply want? And for me, that number was very attainable. It was higher than what I was making. I could still stand to have money flow a little better to get to the this is totally enough. I'm completely relaxed into this, but it's a pretty small increment of shift that I'm looking to make. And there's a lot of relaxation in the attainability of having all the money that would really appreciably support me in having the life that I want to live. So the lifestyle that really allowed me to thrive. And then doing it in a way that doesn't take all my time and energy and focus, so I again can move on to other experiences. So if I'm not working as many hours as I have for most of my practice, I can have a more lingering conversation with my mom, or, research interesting things and geek out on neuroscience, and, go for walks in the hills. And, there's this time freedom that comes with work. And I really want to be in relationship with money like I am with my cars. I happen to have a lifestyle where it's really good to have reliable transportation, and I have a mechanic that I trust. I have AAA, I have a go-to gas station, and I do not think about my cars very much. I just get in and they're set up to work, and I calmly and pragmatically deal with anything that comes up. So I pay DMV when I need to, and I put gas in the tank, and I get the oil changes, and if it's making a weird noise, I run it into the mechanic. But there's a presence with it where there's very little of my psychological and emotional energy that's tied up. There's kind of a neutrality. This is totally worth the price of admission to have a car. The insurance and the gas and the upkeep is totally worth it to me. Absolutely feel really good about this. And at the same time, it's just something that supports me in the background. And I'd love for more people to have that with money. Like, yeah, money is good. I can move on to the full range of human experiences that are available. And doing this exercise can really clean up this amorphous never enough, because there's a lot of money in people never feeling like they have enough. And, we can see the extreme examples of people with shopping addictions. And I've worked with some clients, and it's a horrible thing. You buy things, you get the rush, then there's the shame. You don't have anywhere to assimilate it because your house is filled up with all the things you have. It's a really painful, addictive, emotional cycle, much like, any other cycle of kind of addiction. And it's not supportive. And some of us can find maybe where things have run a little amok. And even if you're not to that, like I've completely manifested the money that would give me the lifestyle that's most supportive, having a clear picture of that can help with not making small purchases. So when I worked as an engineer, I had a lot more random ways that I spent money. My amount of money I had dropped a lot when I became self-employed as a full-time shamanic practitioner. And at the same time, there was a whole bunch of stuff I didn't want that I could have purchased because I was really happy in my life. There was a way that I was managing chemistry with small purchases that was sort of leaking out the ability that might have helped the transition from engineer to full-time shamanic practitioner. If it had been saved rather than spent, it might have made that a little easier. 2020 hindsight, I honor where I was as a young woman having these experiences. But at the same time, I just want to offer that clarity and that sense of attainability. I think it's easier to give up some of the, little luxuries that we might enjoy if we have a dream we're more passionate about. So if we can really see how the lifestyle we really want is attainable and make a plan for that, I think it's easier to pass up things that are the whim of the moment. And so money is a big, huge, complicated question. There's lots and lots of stuff that goes into it. I don't want to oversimplify it, but I just want to offer you this invitation to really sit down and figure out what would feel abundant. What's the smallest amount of money that would feel authentically abundant and really bridge you to the things that would make an incredibly impactful difference in your happiness. On a larger ecological scale, there was this TED Talk where the person was looking at people who have the highest levels of happiness and quality of life with the smallest ecological footprint. So his point was, in terms of the world, we maybe don't want to be so insatiable with running through all of the resources of the world. And so we still want to have, quality of life. So which countries are managing to have the best quality of life, the highest levels of happiness with the smallest ecological footprint? Because that means they're using the resources of the world really efficiently to have good quality of life. So this isn't about going without or deprivation, but it's about having your optimal maybe not be unlimited wealth. There's a lot of overhead that goes with that. Honestly, I feel like, yeah, I would distribute a lot of wealth if it happened to come my way in some really specific ways, but it feels so expansive to have a very attainable number of what would represent a financially abundant life where I could have the things that truly make a difference, that are truly valuable to me, the travel at the level that I want, which I admit is not sleeping on someone's airbed or couch. I want the lovely Airbnb out in the moors of Cornwall to be able to drop in with that experience, but I don't need it to be, the fanciest, most expensive one. I just really need it to be comfortable. And so this clarity is a really valuable exercise, and it might give you a lot of breathing room to be my dream for what would really make me happy with money is very attainable in this lifetime without the magical thinking of a big lottery win. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope that this is really supportive for you in coming into right relationship with money. And this can be applied to many, many areas of our lives where we're looking for what would truly align and truly support us and truly make us happy. Even if it isn't attainable or we don't know how we would get there, having that really zeroed in clarity and taking deep counsel with your soul, I think just has enormous amounts of value and is applicable, of course, far beyond just the topic of money, although money is a really powerful place to start with this. Thank you so much for joining me. To learn more about me and my work, please visit my website at handsoverheart.com. There you can join my mailing list for access to free bonus content in the members-only area. If you've enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. It would help me out a lot. Also, a special thank you to my patrons for your support. You offer me the time freedom to work on passion projects like this one. If you'd like to receive personal shamanic support from me and my team of guides, please consider joining my Patreon community. You'll find the link below. And again, thank you so much for listening. This is Katie Weatherup, wishing you wholeness and happiness.